Welcome to Wordplay Wednesday. Today we're looking at a couple of words from Leo Tolstoy's story, The Three Questions. In this story, a king is looking for answers to some questions. He asks a bunch of people that you think would know the answers, doesn't find his answers there, ends up going to see a hermit, asks him the questions, and through the story, the questions are answered. Today, we're going to be looking at 3 words from that story. And on Friday, we're going to be writing a 7-sentence version of that story to help us with our reading comprehension, language skills, writing skills, all of those kind of things. Let's dive in, see what words we have today. First of all, if you haven't listened to the story yet, go to Saturday Stories. You'll see it, the latest episode, and have a listen there. And then some of these words will make a little bit more sense hearing them in that context. And also you can enjoy the story there. Proclaimed. This is the first word we are looking at. Proclaimed. To say or state something in a public, official, or definite way, to declare or announce something. Perhaps you have listened to the news and somebody has proclaimed something. They've said it in a public, official, or definite way. In the story, this is how the word is used. It once occurred to a certain king that if he always knew the right time to begin everything, if he knew who were all the right people to listen to and whom to avoid, and above all, if he always knew what was the most important thing to do, he would never fail in anything he might undertake. And this thought having occurred to him, he had it proclaimed throughout his kingdom that he would give a great reward to anyone who would teach him what was the right time for every action, and who were the most necessary people, and how might he know what was the most important thing to do. All right, we have some very long sentences, but I wanted to give you a little bit of context for this word proclaimed. So basically, this king wants to know what is the right time for doing things, who are the right people, and what or whom should I avoid? And then he thought, I need somebody to tell me the answer. So he proclaimed, and remember, proclaimed is to state something in a public or official way. So this king had power in his kingdom, and he's proclaiming, getting the information out that if anyone knows the answer to these questions, they're going to get a reward. Here's how you might use it in conversation or in your writing. The magazine proclaimed him to be the best player in baseball. So here we have the magazine stating, again, here's our definition, stating something in public. So we don't proclaim things in private. Proclaiming is always in public. So this works here. The magazine proclaimed him to be the best player in baseball. Here are some synonyms, some words we could use to swap out this word proclaim. Now, when we're using synonyms, we have to be careful that the nuances of the word fit the context. So you'll see we can't just swap them out because they don't mean the exact same thing, but they're close. So as you're improving your English language skills, instead of just taking a thesaurus and going, oh, I need a bigger word, I need a more fancy sounding word, I'm going to pick this random synonym, people are going to know because the nuance is not correct. For example, if I use this word advertise, which perhaps you have seen advertisements. If you if you have eyes to see, you have seen advertisements. If you have ears to hear, you have heard advertisements. We cannot get away from advertisements. People are telling you something, trying to sell something. So let's see this. And this thought having occurred to him, he had it advertised throughout his kingdom. It has a different feel to it, like you're trying to sell something rather than tell something. Doesn't really fit, even though it is a synonym. Announced, okay, that might work. He had it announced throughout his kingdom. I think in the hierarchy of words here, I would say that proclaimed has more authority than announce. If you're in Walmart, you might hear an announcement over the PA system. That would be an announcement, but you don't generally hear a proclamation. A proclamation or proclaiming something seems to have a little bit more of a formal tone to it. Broadcast. This makes me think of the radio. Things are broadcast over the radio without discretion. Anybody can hear it. Proclaim seems to be more targeted towards his kingdom. If we said, and this thought having occurred to him, he had it broadcast throughout his kingdom. Okay, maybe. Proclaim still has that better feel of this. It seems to match the king better. Declare, that might work. He had it declared throughout his kingdom. Could put that. Or publicized. And again, that has a different feel to it. And this thought having occurred to him, he had it publicized. So maybe printed up and put on posters around his kingdom. Do you see how the right word, the right time, the right context, and then it fits? There needs to be some congruency between the word and the context. Third word, absorbed. I love the sound of this word, absorbed. It just feels cool coming out of your mouth. Try saying it a couple of times. If you say it too many times, it's going to start sounding really weird. Absorbed, to take the whole interest or attention of someone or something. Perhaps you're absorbed in something. Perhaps it's your work. Perhaps it's an enjoyable activity, a hobby. You're absorbed in it. It takes up all of your interest. Let's see how this word is used in the story. This is the second word. I think I said third. It's the second word. Others declared that it was impossible to decide beforehand the right time for every action, but that not letting oneself be absorbed in idle pastimes, one should always attend to all that was going on and then do what was most needful. So in plain English, what is he talking about? He said, other people declared it was impossible to know what was the right time for the right action. But basically, pay attention and do the thing that needs doing at the time. That's what he's trying to say here. But he's saying, not letting oneself be absorbed in idle pastimes. This word works here to take up the whole interest or attention. And he's saying, don't let yourself be absorbed. Don't let your idle pastimes or your hobbies take up your whole attention so that you can't focus on what needs doing right now. Now, let's check out some synonyms. Actually, first, let's look where we can use this in our real life. His interest in photography absorbs him completely. This makes sense. We have the pastime or the activity that's taking all of his attention. The word completely also jives with the word absorbs because it adds extra emphasis to the fact that it's consuming all of the attention. Here are the synonyms. Fascinate. Perhaps you've known somebody that is fascinating and you just want to listen to them. You want to take in all of what they are saying, or something is fascinating. Perhaps you're looking at bugs and you like studying bugs and you find them fascinating. They take all of your interest. Here we could say not letting oneself be fascinated in idle pastimes. Perhaps fascinated is a super focused interest, but somehow it doesn't sound quite right. Enthrall. You just love something so much. You're enthralled. It absorbs you. Not letting oneself be enthralled in idle pastimes. We could say that you're enthralled with, like, in an activity, but it doesn't fit the context here. Interest, grip, immerse, these are other synonyms for this word absorb. And as you're going through and you're trying to put things in your writing, you're trying to use new words in your writing, look at some of the verbs, those action words. You can look at a thesaurus, that's fine, but make sure that the word you're selecting has the nuanced meaning that you think it does, and that it matches the context. Last word, frail. Having less than a normal amount of strength or force, very weak. Usually, the picture that comes to my mind when I think of frail is a little old lady. They seem like they're so delicate, like you don't want to break them, and you can help them across the street, and you think if they fall, their bones are going to break because they have less than the normal amount of strength or force. They're very weak. Let's see in the story. When the king approached, the hermit, so remember the king, he went to go visit this hermit and ask him the questions. So when the king approached, the hermit was digging the ground in front of his hut. Seeing the king, he greeted him and went on digging. The hermit was frail and weak, and each time he stuck his spade into the ground and turned a little earth, he breathed heavily. Now, a couple of neat things that are happening in this passage. We have the word frail, which matches with the word weak, which matches with this idea of him breathing heavily. So the author has stacked these images so we get this bigger, better, clearer picture in our head of this hermit. Even though he didn't tell us what the hermit looked like, we can now have a firm picture in our mind of how frail and weak this hermit is. In his old age, his health became increasingly frail. So if you're writing a comment, report, story, we could use it in this way. Or you're writing a letter to somebody. My grandmother is very frail these days, meaning she doesn't have as much strength as she used to. And here are some synonyms that we could use for this word frail. Invalid. Now, invalid, usually they're not going to be out and about, and an invalid wouldn't be digging in the garden. So if I said the hermit was an invalid, then I couldn't say invalid and weak because that's already tied into that. an invalid, I could see the king visiting him. The hermit was an invalid, and perhaps he was on his bed. But frail is perhaps the step before invalid. Decrepit. So sometimes we have like old and decrepit, like they're falling apart. Exhausted. Now, if you use the word exhausted, the hermit was exhausted and weak. Exhausted doesn't give the same idea of not having enough strength. It's just that you're running out of energy. So in this context, probably not the best choice. Vulnerable. Vulnerable is sort of this open to attacks, unprotected. And I don't really get that feel here. The hermit was vulnerable and weak. Then the king would be wanting to protect him. Instead, here, the frailty is about his physical condition. And fragile. Fragile might work. The hermit was fragile and weak. Fragile seems a little more breakable than frail. And if he's digging the dirt, I think fragile wouldn't mesh as well with the context of the story. If somebody is fragile, they probably don't want to be doing some hard labor. So there we have it. Proclaimed, to say or state something in a public, official, or definite way. Absorbed, to take the whole interest. What are you absorbed in today? Frail, having less than the normal amount of strength or force. If you would like to take your English language skills further, we can take this vocabulary and we can go into the 7-sentence story workshop where we're going to use this story, the 3 questions, as a guide in helping us write a 7-sentence story so that we can practice some of the writing skills. We can go through the whole writing process in a shorter period of time and really focus, have some targeted practice on specific writing skills. I invite you to join me. I will put the link for the webinar below, and it is 100% free. Sign up and join me for that on Friday. Until next time, keep reading and writing.